All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for serving me. We are Oliver and Tillman.
And Tillman.
Yeah, two guys from Germany. And Tillman said to me, please explain the audience that this is a sponsor session. Yeah, so we sell you now in the next 50 minutes everything.
Everything.
Washing machine, chewing gum.
Chewing gum.
What is favorite for Germany?
Haribo.
Haribo, yeah. So if you come to our booth, that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
You will see a yellow beer at the top, which is the Haribo beer. And we have a lot of sweets. Last year at Secret Bits.
To explain a little bit, our company is located in Bad Camberg and in Königswinter, which is a small town directly to Bonn.
Yeah.
And Haribo stands
the
for
Bo?
Hans Riegel Bonn. So Hans Riegel is the inventor of the Haribo, and Bonn is the city. So,
exactly. And last time at Secret Bits, we brought a lot of sweets back from Wales. And we don't want to do that this year as well.
Yeah.
So come to our booth. There's a lot of sweets there. Now that was the session, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was everything. So you know now we have things about sweets. You know us, and we have a topic. The topic was data testing with Header.io, and it's a sponsor session. Now we are both community guys. We're running the German data platform community, and so we know if you go to a sponsor session, normally sponsor sessions, maybe they want to sell us something out of Haribo and chewing gums and all that stuff. No, we just want to give you some 50 minutes about a topic that we are working on as a company, but we also want to give you some kind of insight, some kind of advices, some kind of way how to deal with the topic of data testing. Yeah, so it's not just the product itself. We will show the product in some minutes, but it's more from an intentional idea of what you can do with data testing. So let's start. Okay. Without data, you are just another person with an opinion. That's a clever sentence that Tillman just chose for the starting of our demo. Yeah. So we also want to provide you some cleverness, but it's quite interesting sentence from this guy. But what we want to do today is, with regards to data testing, we want to look in a little bit into the problem. What is data testing? So what is the procedure of data testing? And then, of course, yes, we want to switch a little bit into our product and want to show you how we deal with it, how we can help you, and see how it works. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, data problem. Now we have all the little nice icons you maybe all know. Yes, we have most of the time data in some kind of systems, data in people that key in data into transactional systems, etc., etc. And normally we want to work with this kind of data. And normally we have also developers who are developing applications, who are developing reports, etc., on data. And of course, we sometimes run into certain kind of problems, because when we take the data from one system to another, or we want to report something with another software on data that is created in one system, most of the time we are getting into a place where sometimes you don't know where the data is coming from, and you maybe see some kind of values where I think, it's maybe wrong. And today we have even more complex scenarios, because we do these kind of nice data lake things, lake houses. We create medallion architectures where we try to do the data value chain in a certain way in our storages and with certain kind of processes from bronze to silver to gold, or as we say at OH22, we do it from raw via quality into curated. Now, if we do all of that stuff and it comes out that the report doesn't look like our maybe end user, business user, whoever is consuming that is happy with, we run into something like, oh, okay, where do we have that problem? So on the one side, we maybe have a lineage problem because we take the data through all the different stages of our medallion architecture, through our whatever, fabric, lakehouse, any kind of data warehouse, any kind of semantic model, etc., etc. So we need to understand, hey, where is this problem? Yeah. Most of the time, yes, we now have more lineage functionality that we maybe had in earlier times, but again, the problem is still quite tricky to elaborate. Now, to avoid this, we maybe should do, before we run into our, or when we are doing our development process, we maybe should do some proper data testing. So as data is constantly changing, as schemas can change unexpectedly because the guy in the, let's say, transactional system changed the table over the time, or there is some kind of null values because maybe a pipeline has been broken, etc., etc. We have always to deal with these kind of problems that occur when data is transferred from one end to another. Now, when we look at data testing, we maybe think of, okay, data testing, if we talk to our software developers who are developing applications, they will definitely say, guys, you don't do any kind of testing before deploying any kind of data. We always, as good developers, when we deploy an application, we do some kind of unit testing, integration testing, and run tests on our application code before we go to production.
For sure.
You would all agree to that? Yes,
yep.
Of course. Yeah, the application developers are the best, and data engineers are just lousy guys who are just deploying the data anyhow. Yes, of course. Maybe our problem is a little bit more complex than the ones who are deploying whatever Java, .NET, whatever kind of code. But again, of course, we all agree that it would be quite good, and it would be also good practice to test also not our application itself, but also the data that is in it before we do any kind of deployment, etc. So trying to ensure things like accuracy, reliability, etc. of the data. Now, I think everybody who is somehow related to data quality management knows exactly what this is. The point is that applying this into a process most of the time is not so easy to do it. So where can this happen, or where should this happen? Okay, if we do a data migration, if we have any kind of pipeline that is going from one system to another, if we do some kind of nice and fancy reports in maybe Power BI or something like this, or if we look into something like a transactional system as such on a screen or something like this. So what should we do? First of all, we maybe, of course, need to think of the scope that we want to address when we're looking at a test. So how much should we test? What is the data that we are looking at? What is the data set that needs to be controlled and needs to be analyzed if the data is accurate or not? Yeah. We need to understand how the structure is currently from this kind of data to understand the content itself, which is definitely a differences to software developers, because we're not just talking about whatever, a form or a procedure. We are also talking about what happens with this kind of data, and we can analyze the data as such. So we need to understand the quality issues of the data that we have. So we need to do some kind of analysis on the data itself to understand, okay, is this good or is this bad data? And then, of course, we need to create, like in the normal software development, we need to create specific test cases to understand, okay, is the data that we are supplying from one end to another, is this kind of data applying to our requirements of the data? Because requirements, we'll come to that in a second, will differ from the usage of the data, from your expectations to that data. And then, of course, having the possibility to run this kind of tests against the data. But this should happen, and this is also most of the time a little bit of a big problem. Actually, this is sometimes quite complex, because running the test against the data in times of big data, in times of fast data, like any kind of streaming data, this could be quite a challenging thing, because you are not having the technical possibilities to do this in a quite efficient way. Yeah? And then, of course, we need to understand, hey, what happens if our tests are failing? Is this something that we need to maybe just stop the process, maybe run the process and inform somebody else, maybe run the process and see if the data is getting worse and worse, and then interact with it, etc. So there are complete different scenarios that depend on the business case that you have. Now, if you do this, if you look at the data, if you decide what you want to do with the data, of course, from a kind of perspective of how to interact with these kind of problems, you also need to document any kind of issues that you found in your testing as such. Now, if we are looking into the dimensions of what we need to address in our data tests and what we need to look after, we will find the normal DQ dimensions that are standard theory of data quality management. And with these 6 elements here, we can address our tests, and we can step up into our tests and see exactly how we can prove the data based on these kind of dimensions. So first of all, we maybe check, hey, is the data complete? And also here, completeness just means from your personal or from your company view complete, because it could mean complete is just 80% of the data is there. That's fine for us. That's already a good quality, and we are fine with this test. It could also mean, no, we go for 100%. Yeah? Or we just go for, if 20% of that field, for example, is filled, that's for us already a pass of that kind of test. So completeness is something that you can measure in really, really different cases. Then uniqueness also depends in terms of how you want to use the data. If you are with a dimension in your star schema, you maybe don't want to have any kind of double entries, so you definitely say, hey, as soon as we get a double value in our test, the test is failed, everything is gone. If you do that for another application where it's maybe not so necessary, you can say, hey, okay, if we get 2 or 3 double values, still fine for us. More could be an issue. Timeliness. Is the data currently on time, or do we maybe have whatever, just old values? So maybe your rule is, hey, if I get something from our transactional system, the data has to be from that date. It has to be actual, or from that hour. If we receive data from maybe the day before, we run into problems. So again, it's always switching, and you need to prepare your tests in a way that they are flexible, are applicable to your situation on data quality as such. Then, validity. Data follows some kind of rules. I already described some kind of rules with completeness, uniqueness, and timeliness, but validity, difficult word for German, is also something, hey, maybe this kind of value is just in a different range, or so it goes from 1 to 10, etc. And the test should prove if this is, especially this kind of value, is in the interval. And what happens if it's not in the interval? It could get more and more complicated if you say, hey, this kind of interval depends on another field. So maybe if field attribute A has the value x, the interval is from 1 to 10. If it's whatever z, it has the interval from 11 to 20 or something like this. Yeah, you see, we're already creating some kind of complexity that not excuse, but somehow describes why data testing is not so easy, because it has so many different scenarios, so many complex rules that can happen in there. Yeah? The last two things, accuracy, okay. Does it reflect the reality? Okay, what does it mean with reflect the reality? The point is that, of course, depending on your knowledge, yeah, the data steward maybe has to say, hey, what is real? What is what we expect in the data? And consistency, of course, does it match to something like my transaction system in the front? So maybe I need to do some kind of lookups. I need to understand, hey, is this a consistent data or what? Now, I already told you about a lot of different areas and already showed you that we are talking about completeness. So before we are looking into our system, just recap. First of all, it should be something from a data testing perspective that should be integrated in your actual processes. Because if you want to build a data testing, a proper data testing, it should be something that you can do on time, every day, depending on your needs. It should not be something that where you create a lot of effort to do that test, like exporting the data into another system, and then from there on, you're working on it and send back the data maybe the day later. It should be integrated in this way. On the other side, it should carry on and take these kind of data quality dimensions and take them seriously and give the data steward or the person from the business the possibility to define them. But the data engineer or custodian, however you want to call these guys, the possibility to integrate that into your system so that the person from the business can define the rules and you just apply them on your data stream as such. And if I talk about data stream, it should be something in the stream of your data, because it should be something that will be regularly done, so to check the consistency as such in the system. So now I talked a bit about my requirements or our requirements in terms of data testing. That's another intelligent sentence.
I like that.
Yeah, okay, so you have to tell the sentence and you then step on in the product and see what our product, if we deliver something in this case, and then you can decide, you can say, oh yeah, so what Oliver said, it's nice, but the product doesn't deliver. Or, oh, quite cool. So let's go and dive into header, and maybe you describe a little bit what header is and from a technical perspective as well.
So I will start to describe a little bit what head.io is and how it works. So head.io is a central management application where you can define all your data tests, or how we call it in our application, you can define all your business rules and so-called rule books, which are build a flow of data rules to validate your data. And the aim of this application is not that you define that as a data engineer, so that you are in your notebook defining your business rules or your data tests. So our idea is that we have this management application which can be used also by the business, by data stewards, by data custodians, and so on, so that a broader range of people can work with business rules and create data tests, because the data engineer is not the only person in the company usually who knows how the data should look like. He knows how when the data fails or when the pipeline fails, but usually the business is has a knowledge about the data and what is correct and what's incorrect.
Yeah, and also can definitely define better the requirements of the data, because they will find it in their applications later on. Yeah.
And so what you can do in head.io is you can define all the schema information for all entities, or we call it knowledge bases. You can define these business rules, rule books, and you can also define dataset rules, which are not working on a row level. They are working on a complete data set level. So normally you can say, I check a specific column for null values, and if there's a failure, my data test fails. But sometimes it's good to have null values in your data, but if the number of null values exceed maybe 20%, you have more than 20% null values, then you get a problem. And this is something you can do with dataset rules. And header as the management application is not linked to your data. Header works in a way that it can be integrated directly into your processes. So that means we have the management applications on one side, and on the other side, we have different runners. And you can use these runners to execute the business rules directly on your data. And that means for specific systems like Fabric, Databricks, Python, how was it?
Synapse.
Synapse.
Still
Yeah,
the
Synapse. You bring the business rules to the Spark system and execute the business rules directly on your data onto Spark.
What the other cool thing is about, if you think about a data quality system that uses compute power, what we can do with this is we can scale up in the way you scale up. So if you have a large Databricks cluster, we are on that large Databricks cluster.
Exactly.
So you do not send the data to another application which has another set of cores. You are running this on exactly this kind of machine.
Yeah. Then we have a .NET runner. And if you go to our booth, our colleague Raphael will always show a notebook in VS Code, which is using our .NET runner because he's a .NET developer and he used that. But the .NET runner also is the runner for our container app jobs. So we have a container app job which can run directly on your data. If you save a Parquet file on a data lake, the container app job can directly run on this data. And it's much faster in some situations than if you're doing the same with a Spark cluster, because the Spark cluster has to start, and the container app job is complete serverless, and you can process 1 million records in under 1 minute. So we can process it, I think, at the moment in 28 seconds or something like that. And
but the idea is really to say, hey, you take the runner for the use case you need.
Yes.
Because of course it's quick with, let's say, smaller amounts to 1 million or something like this. But if you're talking about real big data where you have maybe 1 billion rows or something like this, that will definitely fail. And therefore we have the other runner that can leverage the Spark engines and all the nodes and the distributed system to do exactly this.
Exactly. And if you liked this session and also sponsor sessions, we have another one on Saturday, and there we will present also the Excel add-in, which is completely new, and we like to show it there. Okay, let's look a little bit into header, how it works. So this is the management application of header.io, and I started directly, as you can see here on the left side.
Oh, you have Zoomit.
We have a SQL Bits project, and inside this project here I have something which we call knowledge base, and it's the New York yellow taxi trip records. And here you can see directly the score of this knowledge base. And this is the overall score we have at the moment. It's 65%. And if I click on the runs, you will see on the right side that we have different executions. So a run is a set of executions, and you can define a run for a specific system, maybe for Databricks, or you have a run specified for your data, which is coming from D365 or something like that. And then you see here on the right side your executions. And this execution has a score also from 68%, because we always work on the same data here. And you can see all the results for each execution, and then it's aggregated to run and then to the overall data.
So can we say the execution is the test?
The execution is a test, correct.
Exactly. Yeah. So you see that we are running all these kind of tests, and that this is, as it is integrated, you will see that later on, but as it is integrated, we have a history of the test, and the metadata of the history with all the results of your data quality is sent back to the header system.
Exactly. And how should the test look like? So on the one side, we have domains. Domains are like columns or attributes or something like that. And here we are defining our schema. And you see here on the right side, we are defining the data types, the precision, the scale, if it's a key domain, and different things which are related to the domain. Then we have rulebooks. And rulebooks are combining different rules which we like to check, and also the rule flow, what happens if a rule fails or if it's valid, how the data flows through the system. And as you can see here, this could be a complex rulebook, but you can also define simple business rules to that. And if I go to one of these rules, I will just switch here to the edit version, go to that. You can see here on the right side how you can define your business rule or your test for the data here at this part. So we have a preparation step at the beginning where we can change a little bit the data, and then we have a condition where we can define the rule to say here the drop-off date time is lower than or equal to the pickup date time. And you are also able to define an action to that. If you not only want to test your data, you can also clean up your data here directly and define an action, so to do something with your data so that it's correct after this condition.
Where we have to say, normally, this is just a feature function that we added to it, but normally we see it like this. We normally want to control, we want to test this, but we don't want to change it in a certain way. But sometimes, depending on your workflow, there is this kind of need to check, because normally not in a test you would like to change the data later on. It's something that we just put as an add-on by the wish of also some customers saying, hey, we just want to do it here and we don't want to create another whatever notebook, etc. that is doing the job. Normally we don't see this product as a transformation tool or something like this.
And you can see here, hopefully the beamer give it a little bit, that we have business rules with a blue line and an orange line. So the idea here is if you have a business rule with a blue line and you have these outputs on the left side and the right side, if the data came out, it's valid or it's invalid. It's the only possibility. If you have an orange line on a business rule, like here, this one, then it's a logical business rule which will not set your record. You can work with different business rules on top of the data. Maybe you will split it into different countries because you have another, or you have different business rules for the UK and for Germany or something like that.
Yeah. And if you remember what I said earlier, as we have this kind of complex situation where you maybe have in one attribute X, Y, Z, and in the other one you maybe have some kind of intervals, you can also do this kind of interaction between these kind of rules and decide what you want to do with this, because this reflects the reality in it. And of course, it's still somehow technical. This is something where we always debate on how much technical we can do it. But of course, we want to adjust it as much as we can to complex scenarios. We think from a visual perspective that this kind of workflow is also for people in the business to understand how this kind of rule works in a quite nice way.
Yeah, and I think also here on the right side, as you can see again, the business rules, it's maybe easy for business people to add additional business rules, add additional conditions, you can add sub-conditions. But if you're more technical guy, there's also an API behind that, and you can do that everything via the API. Then we have the dataset rules, which are similar here. It has not this rule flow because we have only one or executing one dataset rule after another, and you can do that here same way as in the rule books. If I go here to edit, we have similar editor here where you can define your business rules.
And again, the dataset is really something like I described. If you say, hey, I have 80% is still fine, 60% of the values are wrong, this is wrong. Yeah, so this is something that reflects the whole data set and control this from a test perspective.
So if you like to check how your system works, we have a small preview here. You can use here data which you have defined in the system for a preview, for a test of your business rules, and execute it, and then you get the overview here that, oh, I have to, okay, I will do it again. Overview here of the data we have executed, and you see here on the left side directly which records were correct and which were incorrect. You can filter here for valid data, invalid data. Underlying columns here are changed from some business rules, and if you click on the icon here, you see directly inside of the flow where the which business rule failed. So you can see here there are a lot of, hopefully the beamer can show it, a lot of green ones, but here's a red line. So this was the business rule which fails, and why this record now is incorrect.
But the importance is this is just a preview.
This is just a preview.
Yeah, and it's just the intention for the preview is just to say, hey, if you are in the elaboration of designing this kind of data test correctly, to understand that the way the outcome of that is detecting wrong data, bad data correctly, this is the place where we do this. Later on, we then export all this kind of information as well.
Exactly. And I will click it again, and then you will see something here in the lower right corner. There you see there is a Teams message. So this is something where the data testing is also come into our application. You can create trigger on your data. So if something happens, you can add a trigger which do some actions. We have different things, how we call that in the system, and you can then send an information maybe to a Teams channel. This is just a simple information that there's something executed, but you can also send messages to Teams based on a specific dataset business rule or other business rules that fails.
Or you can trigger an event grid or something like this.
Exactly. So we have a lot of different things in it. You can create bugs directly in DevOps. You can trigger an event grid, send emails, and so you can work with the system. And I will directly jump to the forward to the next demo. Here's another trigger part, trigger event. That's something we call manual trigger, and we'll just execute that to go to another part and explain it a little bit. So one part here with the triggers is only for showing functionality in header. That's the manual trigger. What we are doing here at the moment, we are just with click on trigger event in the background, I trigger an ADF pipeline. And just the idea here that you can create these different triggers, but it's also something which you can use for testing your data. You are creating your business rules inside of the application, and you can say here trigger event and execute a pipeline on top of your data, which then executes head.io and checks your data and validates the data. But what we are doing here in the background is, I will go here, and you see now here two pipelines which were running. The first part, copy data, that was the pipeline which I triggered during head.io. And the second one is a pipeline which executes a Databricks notebook based on a trigger from Azure with a blob created. So the first part, we just exported data from a system into a data lake, and then we have a trigger on top of the data which executes a notebook with header as soon as a file is created. And this is something you can test your data. If you think about systems which will continuously push data or export data into your raw data zone, or in the Bronx zone, then you can create a trigger on top of that. And each time a new file has written to the data lake, a notebook is executed, and this notebook's call header and validate your data. And then you can set up this notebook in the way where you say, okay, if this data has a quality from more than 80, 90, 100%, then go further with the data. If not, stop my pipeline here. Don't go further. That's something how you can test your data.
Before you jump into the notebook, we just missed one thing about the knowledge base itself, about synonyms and the knowledge base as such. to show that as well?
Mm.
Yeah, because we showed the rules, but we also have another functionality that compares the values in terms of their correctness. So, for example, synonyms and all this kind of stuff.
So yeah, that's a special functionality inside of head.io, inside of the domains, but I don't think we have that in our example. So you came up with different things which I'm not
sorry.
prepared.
But maybe then on next time. But maybe his, because this is always the joke between us, is he's always doing the rules, but I also find quite interesting, we have our knowledge base has domains, and domains is, for example, you have a country list or something like this. Yeah, and what the system can do, it's not just doing a rule on a country, like, for example, it has to be whatever, an ISO code with 2 letters or something like this. We can, of course, check the content as such, which is also, as you remember what I said earlier, very important. And this kind of check is a kind of check that is a little bit more intelligent, because it has some kind of fuzzy logic in. We have different algorithms that can do this. Yeah, so for example, key distance or Levenstein or whatever you imagine. And it can divide between, hey, this is a correct value, this is a synonym, this is a wrong value, and then can decide based on a certain kind of threshold to say, hey, if this is a good or bad value in the data.
I have something prepared.
Oh, you have prepared something. That's
okay, so that's an example of the members. So here's a simple example. We have female and male, and if an M came in, it's a synonym of male, the data will directly change from M to male.
Yeah.
And if here, maybe female, somebody missed the L, and the system will detect that based on our phonetic algorithms and will also change it to female.
Yeah.
And you can build up this member list in the application, but you can also use an external paquet file with all the data, so you can provide that in your data lake and then work on the external data, and so to check if the members are correct, and also to change it if you have defined the synonyms here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go into the notebook, because I just talked a lot about header and how you can define business rules and so on, but now we want to see how can we integrate that in our process. And for that, I will go here. This is a notebook which was running in the background. And what I have to do here is, first I have to use pip install to install our library into the notebook, but then I have to use these lines of code, and that's all I have to do. So I have to start with header create using the management application, the URL of the management application, the API key, define my project, knowledge base, the run, and then with use data df. Df is my data frame, which I pass to the library. And then I start that, and here for Databricks, we have a special display HTML part to show our widget underneath, and then the data will be processed. And these lines of code are enough in your notebooks to process all the business rules you defined before in the management application, and to validate and also maybe to clean up your data.
So it loads the metadata into the runner that runs in that Databricks notebook on that cluster, and applies exactly this kind of stuff based on the runner to the data that is passed through the metadata.
Yeah. And we also, so if you work directly in the notebook, you will also see the small widget here where you can go through and see where we have failures in it per domain, which business rules fails. And so you can also check that directly here inside of the notebook.
So you can have some kind of interactivity in your notebook, but of course you can run that notebook just in your pipeline or wherever you want that, and just run it, and all the values that are created in the background are stored somewhere.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and what I showed here is with the event, the idea behind that you can create all your business rules and everything directly in the management application, and then integrate that everywhere where you want to test your data. So you just have this small notebook, load a paquet file, execute header, and you can execute the complete notebook from different processes. We use here the ADF to execute the notebook, but you can also use the API to directly execute the notebook. So that's really simple to start that. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So each execution is
Should
directly.
we repeat the question for the
Yeah,
people outside? So the question was by Camille, if we store the data that is produced here, so the result sets, what is good, what is bad, per record, etc. Do we store that somewhere else? Yes, we do. We pass that back to our application so that we have this complete history. And that's the only time when we send some kind of data back to our system. So you load the metadata, a small bunch of metadata information. You process your big data on your cluster, and what we send back is just the history and just the result set, so that we can have some kind of measures that we can check over time to see exactly what's going on with our data.
Yeah. So as you can see here, that was the time I executed the notebook. And so you can directly go here and see then the results of your tests, which were executed in the background. Yeah. There's also an additional functionality, which you can see here. We call it enable data upload. If you add this feature, then we can also store the data you process at this moment in a data lake, which is related to head.io. And then you have the possibility and also go here to analyze result set and then analyze the results directly in head.io so that you can see the failures or the valid data per record. But for that, you have to set these enable data upload. Otherwise, we only store the statistics.
Yeah. And of course, the reason behind this is just if we run on large data sets, we just don't want to pollute the whole thing. And we only do that on purpose so that you can have this kind of drill down in the end. But all these values as well are also still available in whatever you do later on with the data in your notebook, for example. Can you show that as well?
No.
Or did I?
No, we don't have that here.
Okay.
But let me check here. Okay. So the idea what we showed here is maybe for the raw bronzes zone that you can act directly on data which comes into your data lake, that you can directly work on the data and validate the data and think about how you process the data. So if you stop pipeline, if you go further with that. And the silver area or quality zone, it's not about really data testing, because there we think you really want to clean your data. Enrich your data, and that's something we can also do with head.io. We can also enrich that. But at the end, you somehow have these processed data and publish that to your BI environment. And that's something which I like to show in Fabric. And here I just started that. I also installed the library, set some Spark configuration on top of that. And then I will go through that and explain it a little bit. Okay, so we start here. I'm using now a library which is called Zempi, or Semantic Link, from Fabric. If you're interested in that, we will go in another session tomorrow through that. It's not a sponsored session, it's just about Semantic Link. But with this library, I have the possibility to query directly my data in Fabric. And the first part I like to do here is I just load a table which is stored in my data set, store sales. And I just get the data, and then I pass it to my to head.io. And if it works, something is running in the background. That's something where you can directly check the data in the notebook. That comes running, and you see that a slow a little bit. There you will see that I have a quality score of 0, because what you can see here is that inside of my domains, there's one attribute, one domain where the data type validation is completely invalid. So the complete validation fails, and so I have a score of 0, and now I can stop my process. But what else I can do is with these XAMPI, and this is just also for the data testing, so if you're going to production, I'm also able to load measures. And I can load these measures and also build business rules on top of these measures, which will then check that. And here you can see I have now a score of 88% based on the business rules I defined for measures. And the same thing I can do here also for DAX statements. So I can create a simple DAX statement on top of my data set I put into Fabric, and then I can run a specific knowledge base with my specific business rules on top of this DAX statement and test it after production. Because the idea behind that is that at some point the data itself could be correct, but if you test that in your whole environment with a DAX statement, maybe that the numbers are wrong at this part.
Or you think of, there's a lot of people who are doing self-service BI, developing certain kind of semantic models, and you think of, do we have any kind of possibility to test the semantic models as well? And with this nice kind of library, it offers us, from a header perspective, the possibility to connect the notebook to the semantic model, take the data out of the semantic model, not just the data, also the measures as such, and then can run our business logic exactly on that, which is a quite great functionality, and enhance, of course, the whole scenario of data testing enormously.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we showed so far here is only the widgets, the output of these business rules. But if you really test your data, you're also interested on the outcome of the test, not only on some nice visualizations. The result of each execution is also data frame. And in this data frame, we store the original data, we store the corrected data, and also all information about the business rules itself. And this data frame can then be queried by yourself, that you can only say, okay, give me the invalid ones, and I process them manually on another system. Give me the valid ones, and I will proceed with them in my normal pipeline. And so you can split the data. If you're interested in this, we can show it to you at our booth, so feel free to come by.
All right.
Okay.
Anything in addition? We have 1 more minute?
1, 2.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oh, sensational. I didn't talk so much, so that's the reason why we are 2 minutes earlier. So if you have any questions, just, yeah.
So where is this application, front-end and the database that you collect extra logs and metadata are stored or hosted?
Okay, so the question is, where is this kind of application hosted? This is also quite special because our projects came from quite regulated areas. So what we offer is that you can completely install this whole application in your own Azure subscription. So there is no kind of whatever services where the data goes back to, let's say, our environment, etc. So we have no insights of your data. We are just delivering the whole stack. Of course, based on the licensing, it's like this, you pay the licensing, but of course you pay as well underlying services from Azure. So for example, any kind of app or SQL instance that we are using behind the scenes to run all of that. But the benefit is it's all yours. Yeah, and you can run that in dev, QA, prod. We have different deployment options for you guys. So this is really something that we address to you. And nothing that comes from our side. Yeah, nothing hosted on our side.
Yeah, yeah. And it works completely with private endpoints, managed identities,
yeah.
Everything set up.
Yeah. There's another question?
Yeah. When you change business rule, can I also see the preset version?
Yeah, the versioning?
Uh,
So the question was, is there a possibility to see if you are changing rules, etc.? And do we have a kind of versioning, I guess? Yeah, that's, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not in this way at the moment. At the moment, we have always an active version and an edit version. And the active version is the public one, which you will use. And the edit version is the one you're working at the moment. You can then set a special flag in the notebook to execute your data directly on the edit version to test it before you publish it. But at the moment, we have no possibility to go back. But by the end of the year, I hope Q3, Q4, we will have everything which is related to the business rules set up in Git, so that all these business rules are JSON objects, and we store that completely in Git.
All right. Cool. So if you have no further questions, thank you for your audience. And if you have any additional questions, come to our booth. If you just want to have some chocolate or some crazy cable binders, just also come to our booth. We were happy to give it up to you. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
audience.
You.